Don't go anywhere. We're going to have a quick word from one of our sponsors, Apax Lab. Elevate your coffee experience with Apax Lab mineral concentrates. Apax Lab's precision-engineered formulas, including tonic, jam, and lilac, are designed to enhance the coffee's natural flavors. It's not going to change it, it's just going to enhance it. It's going to bring out the vibrant acidity, the rich sweetness, or if you use lilac, it might bring out those delicate floral notes that you've been looking for. Trusted by world-class cafes and even barista champions, Apax Lab helps you unlock your coffee's full potential. Discover more at apaxlab.com. Wait, where was that again, Sonam?
The internet.
Oh, okay. Thought he was going to say the website. Thanks. Today's episode is brought to you by our amazing sponsors at Eco Barista. The reason I sound like this is because they got massages at our stand at Mice, and so I'm getting a massage while recording this message for you. They're the best sponsor of the pod that we could have had. They have the best eco products. This probably sounds really pornographic, but it's not. I'm just getting a massage. They have the best eco-friendly coffee products. They got coffee bags that you can design yourself. They got cups. They got iced coffee cups. They got everything you need. So make sure to support them because they support us. Head to ecobarista.com.au and get 15% off your first purchase when you sign up. Oh, mama, that's good.
So, Rowan.
Hi.
Do you remember the first piece of coffee equipment you purchased at home?
Oh, absolutely. I thought I was a baller. I was working as a barista and I saved up for months and I bought the Breville Jewel Boiler. It must have been not long after release. Cost me like $1,500 and I thought I was a killer being able to make like a good latte or a flat white at home. What about you?
Yeah, I went an espresso machine as well. I felt so fancy. It was back in early 2000s. It was a little Sunbeam kind of machine. Felt so cultured. I was out there making my little coffees. But it was a bit of a, it was actually pretty revolutionary at the time, right? It had introduced the thermoblock, heating system for the first time. Had a funky little 47 millimeter portafilter and basket there with those pressurized baskets just to make sure you really got some crema, right? And, you had to angle the milk jug just so you got any kind of whirlpool. It was fun. Coffee was kind of average.
Yeah, absolutely. But things have changed a lot since the 2000s. There's better access to quality green. There's amazing roasting skills. And just the tech of home gear has gone through the roof.
Yeah, it's definitely made some huge progress. But look, there's always challenges, right? There's always new things to explore, new ways we want to improve stuff, which is part of the fun of coffee. So, I think I'm pretty excited about our guest today because the mindset and the approach needed to solve some of those challenges and keep us kind of ticking forward is super important. So we're going to be diving a little bit today into some of how to tackle those problems, the dark arts of mechanical engineering and the mindsets there with our guest. And hopefully get some problem-solving techniques and some insights into home coffee preparation that we can use to tackle the coffee future ahead.
We are. Welcome, everyone, to the pod. We are your hosts, Rowan Cook.
And Ben Bicknell.
And it's just
coffee. It's just coffee. We kind of got that one there.
Yeah, when we're doing it over the internet, there's maybe a bit of a lag of us yelling out, it's just coffee. But this is the podcast that brings you all the inside scoops, tips, tricks, and inspiring guests. And we're going to tackle the future of coffee together. And welcome to our guest today, Nick Terzulli of Fellow Coffee. Woo! Oh, what a get. But before we dive in, Nick, let's set the stage for everyone. Can you tell us, if people don't know you, give us a quick intro. Who are you and what do you do at Fellow?
Sure. So my name's Nick Terzulli. I've been a mechanical engineer for over 20 years now, and my role at Fellow is VP of R&D. So I basically help come up with all the next generation technology for the company.
Awesome. That's amazing. And for anyone unfamiliar with the brand, can you just give us a little rundown of what Fellow is all about and what sets you apart in the coffee game?
Sure. So Fellow's whole mission is to make really beautiful stuff that also works. So I think that if someone's not familiar with Fellow, if you're into coffee, you've probably seen our Stag EKG kettle at a lot of coffee shops. But when you dive deeper into the company and what we're doing, like we're really, really heavily focused on design, but we try to back that design up with features and functions that a lot of other companies just really aren't trying to tackle.
A good approach to having something that actually works and works for people. And Nick, you said you were dialing in from kind of in the surrounds of San Francisco there in the US. You know, the US is like it is the biggest coffee consuming nation in the world, and everywhere around the world is a little bit different. Like what's on the bench at people's home, how do people drink coffee on the day to day? What does that look like? Can you paint us a bit of a picture for the US coffee drinking at home background?
Sure. So I think like over the past, I would say 10 years, it's really spun a gamut. So like we have people who just drink caffeine because it's their like lifeblood and they need it to wake up in the morning, all the way to like the upper ends of specialty. So like we have customers that will, you know, pair one of our coffee brewers with like carbonized Robusta. And we also have customers, you know, like me who are using like insane equipment to like meticulously dial in a V60 every morning. So, you know, it really spans the gamut here. We have all different types of people making everything at home, from, you know, pods to, you know, incredible espresso.
The kind of history of the trajectory is like a lot of filter coffee, right? Like the majority like a little drip machine on the bench at home, dark roasted, maybe pre-ground, right? That was kind of maybe the history and the inertia that you're trying to shift people to something better, yeah?
Exactly. So like one of Fellow's goals, and like one of my goals personally, is to like try and help people drink better coffee at home. You know, anything that we can do to like elevate specialty is the end goal.
What's your setup on the bench at home?
So I'm going to be very honest with you, and there's going to be people who, I know I'm going to get flack for this, but like, so please keep in mind that I do this for a living, right? So I have like probably a 6-foot lab bench at home, and this is my setup, okay? Nice. So on the espresso side, I have my espresso machine's a decent DE1 XL. Before I invented Espresso Series 1, that was my main espresso machine. Next to that, I have a Option O P100 with the SSP 98 millimeter high uniformity burrs. So that's like my main espresso setup. Then I have my Stag EKG Pro kettle. Next to that, I have a Weber Workshops EG1 V2 with the Ultra burrs, one of my filter coffee grinders. Next to that, I have a Titus Nautilus with 98 millimeter brewing burrs. And next to that, I have an EK43S with 98 millimeter brewing burrs and a Titus Carrier. That's my main cupping grinder. Next to that, I have a 5-gallon water dispenser because I make my own water for all of my cupping, for all of my filter coffee. So yeah, it's pretty extravagant, but like keep in mind that since I do this for a living, I try to benchmark a lot of the things that Fellow does against like the things that I consider best in class. And that's just what I personally love.
Oh man, you need to do one of those, like a TikTok video of like, here's the home setup of the VP of engineering at Fellow Coffee, and just show that setup, because that would go off. That's amazing.
Also, I try not to like tell too many people that, because it's like, I realize how privileged I am. And I just like, I'm so grateful that I have the opportunity to even own that type of equipment. So yeah.
Oh, you're so humble and so nice. I think you're allowed to gloat a bit when it's like literally your job. I think it would be a bit different if you were like just a lawyer or a doctor and you had that set up and you use it once a month or something. But in your position, it makes a lot of sense to kind of have that set up. Now, diving into the home espresso kind of market, what do you think so far has been the biggest impediment for people to make better coffee at home?
I think there's always been this kind of like this graph of like, how much money do I need to spend versus the results that I get? And a lot of people, like, they'll start with an espresso machine that's say a few $100s and it has a 20 bar pump. And they're just like, oh, I'm not getting the results that I want. And then you spend a little more money for a little more features and a little more money for a little more features. And I think the biggest like impediment to making like cafe quality at home is like thermal stability and pressure stability. So like, that's like what I really tried to set out to solve when I was working on Espresso Series 1.
And so let's unpack that. We mentioned it a few times, the Espresso Series 1. Can you give us the big picture snapshot? What is this machine?
All right. So Espresso Series 1 is, in my opinion, the most functional, capable espresso machine ever designed for the home for the price. So for about $1,500 US, you get a machine that can really replicate, machines that are in cafes, but in your own home.
Yeah. So why did you kind of come up with this idea now? Why was it important to release this particular machine at this point in time?
I think, myself and Jake, the CEO of Fellow, we talked about doing this like 5-ish years ago. When during the interview process, like, what would you ever want to make, and kind of bounce ideas back and forth. And I think for me personally, like over the past 10 years, I've used a bunch of different types of machines, and I've seen everything on the home market. And I've been an espresso machine technician, and I saw this gap in the market, and I was like, there's not really anything that can do all this stuff at the price. And I think now is the time to take a really, really big swing. And so Fellow as a company was like, when I pitched them this idea, they were like, if you really can do this, if you really can do everything you say this thing can do for the price, we will let you build it. And so that's how the initial spark got started.
Now, you are the VP of Research and Development. I have to say, having VP in the title, so cool. The Vice President of, I need to throw that in my title. I love it. But you live and breathe innovation. That sounds like a pretty cool role. And even touching on there that, you have that kind of trust where they're like, go ahead and build this. How did you end up there? What led up to this point?
So I think, the thing that Fellow does, and kind of how my role works, partly anyway, is like, we'll find, sales and marketing, we'll find white space in the market, and we'll be like, Nick, we want to release a product that costs about this much money in about this much time. And, can you go tell us what you think you can do for X amount of dollars? And I'm just like, okay. So what I did, in the development of Espresso Series 1 is I basically designed 3 espresso machines. And I said, hey, for this much money, you get this performance. For this much money, you get this performance. But if you give me just a little bit more wiggle room, I think that I can help deliver something that's never been done before. And that's when the conversation was like, wait a minute, you can get commercial quality, pressure profiled shots with a less than 2-minute heat up time for this amount of money. Like, if you go and make us that prototype and you prove out the physics, we will let you build it.
Yeah, that's so cool. And I have to say, like, I feel like the first time when I got the Breville Jewel Boiler that I was talking about, like, I was excited. There was like this, like, I can make this kind of coffee at home. Like, the fact that I could pour a beautiful Rosetta with like silky milk at home was kind of like boggling to me. And as someone that works on a lot of machines, you see a lot of cool stuff, but this is the one that I'm just like excited about again. Like, I've got that same buzz in me from when I was like a 20-year-old, and I just want to get my hands on it and test out all of these features.
That's amazing. And that's the goal, is like, try and give the unlock to the user, right? Like, try and get users excited about a machine in the home landscape that really no one's tried to tackle at this price point before.
And I think coming up with this particular idea is, and the way to unpack that gap and solve those problems is a pretty big challenge. And you're a mechanical engineer. You've kind of mentioned this is like your professional background, and you've talked about your love of problem solving. I think you're someone that actually likes problems out there in the world, so you can come along and try and tackle them and unpick them. What kind of attracts you to this kind of work? And like, if someone was thinking of moving into this space of trying to create new things, what are some of the skills that you think really they need to have?
So I think the biggest skill is, like, for me, I don't think that like I'm that intelligent or bright of a person. And I'm not speaking negatively about myself, but I think the thing that has gotten me to where I am in my career today is like persistence and tenacity, and just being able to bounce back from failing a lot. So I would say that like my superpower, if I had one, is being able to fail over and over again until I get something right. Outside of that, I think like in terms of engineering, the way that I solve problems, and a way that I think that a lot of, some of the best engineers in the world solve problems, is to break extremely complicated problems down into their fundamentals. Because I've never came across any problem that I haven't been able to solve if I break really complex things down into those fundamentals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great kind of technique that you can use probably across any different really complex situation or task you're trying to challenge.
And the overall, I would say like the reason why I'm so drawn to this is like, I can't explain to you the joy that I get from having, an idea in my head, moving it to a sketch, to moving it to a real product. And luckily now, like, millions of people use some of the products that I helped come up with, and they're brewing coffee with stuff that I helped make. And that's just like, it's wild to think that like I have some small impact on their day, and that just brings me an immense amount of joy.
I think that persistence of following through is so important, because I feel like I meet too many people who put all the value on the idea. Like, you know how you have those friends that always say to you, like, they see something really amazing happen. They go, oh, I had that idea 5 years ago. Oh, I had that idea this. Yeah, but you didn't do it. You didn't you didn't get your pencil, put it to paper. You didn't put in the hard yards. Like, the idea is one part, but following through to the inception of making the thing is really the tricky part, I think. So that's something amazing that you're kind of doing, where it's not just the ideas, but it's bringing it to life. And there's nothing more satisfying, especially when it's like a physical piece of machinery in front of you where you're like, I'm now brewing coffee on that thing that I thought about, a couple years ago. So that's amazing. Now, one of the things with the Espresso Series 1, you'd think a machine with all this kind of, pressure profiling and all these features would be really like the prosumer kind of level. And it is, but it's also bridging that gap for beginners. How did you go about solving these problems? What did you think was wrong with the home market, and how did you solve it with the Espresso Series 1?
So I think the thing that I saw in the home market is that there are a lot of machines that, beginners buy, and there are a lot of machines that prosumers and professionals buy, but there aren't very many machines that both people buy, if it's either for price or some people just get honestly intimidated. Like, some machines, like, they feel like, oh, if I walk up to this thing and I touch it and I press the wrong button or whatever, I'm gonna break it, right? And so the real goal, and the way that I like to design, the way that Fellow likes to design, is that we try to make things that can appease the broadest section of the market that we can, right? So just as an example for Aiden, right? When Aiden came out, it has instant brew. So Aiden's our filter coffee brewer. If you don't know what you're doing, you just put some grounds in the basket, you press instant brew. It works just like every other coffee maker. But if you want to really get deep, you could peel back layers of the onion to do different profiles and different temperatures and, really, really, really go, to the next level. It's the same exact way with Espresso Series 1. So if you don't know what you're doing, we're going to try and help guide you to make incredible espresso at home. But if you're, if it's your 1,000th shot and you're a professional, you can unlock just immense amount of capability within the machine.
Do you find it hard to switch off the problem solving thing? Do you start like looking around at all different pieces of equipment, start picking it up, looking at it from different angles and going, like, how could I make this better?
I think that's just ingrained in me. And I'll say that, like, I'm just going to make like a bit of a joke here, but like my wife can sometimes hate it because I'm just like always on the lookout for how I can make things better. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's kind of like the thing in my personality that gives me the opportunity to help a company like Fellow solve problems like this. So I'm always trying to figure out a way to make something better. And also, like, over the years, I've been able to collect and store that knowledge. It's like, oh, I understand why this machine company did this, and I understand why this machine company did that. And like, you build those little blocks of knowledge so that when the time comes to make something, you have this like complete repository of things to pull from and how to help you move forward.
Yeah, I think you can spot the equivalent in like a cafe operator personality, where they go into a cafe and they get their cup of coffee, and the first thing they do is like lift it up and look at what's the brand of the coffee cup that I'm looking at, and they're checking out, the cutlery and, scoping out how was this put together, what's the operational workflow. And like we were saying about sight glass before we started the pod, is standing up in a new cafe and looking at the workflow in a space and trying to unpick what is the problem and the solution there. It's a lot of fun.
Oh, I remember that reference point for when you were in San Francisco. I remember being there, and is it the Mill?
Oh yeah, the Mill.
Yeah, the Mill.
Josie Baker, right?
Yeah. I remember being in there and coming from Melbourne and in the US, they had like 2 bars set up with 3 group La Mazzocos, and they had 1 barista on each one. And they were trying to split the orders and do it that way. I'm like, no, just have the one machine, have 2 baristas on that one pulling shots, 1 doing the milk, doing that. Be so more efficient. I was just like looking on like, this is so slow.
Let's dive a little bit deeper into the machine itself and like the problems that you were trying to solve here. And what did you hope you could create as an outcome for consumers at home with the machine?
So I think a lot of this was honestly driven partly by our sales and marketing team. So a big reason why I designed Espresso Series 1 the way I did is like sales and marketing looked at me and they said, Nick, we want a 3-second heat up time. And I was like, oh, wow, let me go back to the drawing board. Let me see what I can do. And basically what I did was I collected a bunch of data and I explained very thoughtfully that I couldn't stand behind the coffee that a 3-second heat up time machine had made. And I said, well, it got my gears turning a little bit. I was like, what if you give me 90 seconds? If you give me 90 seconds, I think we can get commercial level quality at home. So I have to give a lot of credit to sales and marketing for pushing me on the 3-second thing, which is how I drove the architecture of Espresso Series 1. But really it was for the money. Can we truly give someone the opportunity to replicate that same exact shop that they get at a cafe, whether that cafe has a La Marzocco machine or a Slayer machine or Synesso machine or, whatever it may be?
What were the key elements of that? What do you think was driving like getting that high quality cup at home? Out at the other end.
Everything that Fellow does, we try and do things a little bit, I don't say a little bit extra, but like 10% more than a lot of other companies will go. Like for instance, like Stag and the EKG and EKG Pro, like we came up with like a calibration way to like make sure every single kettle was matched to every single base and the water temperatures within a degree. And Aiden with the same exact thing. It's like we're trying to give people the best possible results. And oftentimes, like for me personally, I find the best results comes out of commercial equipment, which is, what drove this initiative, at least on my part, to kind of match the capability of a $10, $20, $30, $40,000 machine. And that is really driven by, pressure stability and temperature stability, if I want to just get down to brass tacks.
So let's talk about that temperature, because if we look at it, commercial machines use huge double boilers to kind of keep that temperature consistent. And then one of the biggest problems with home espresso machines is the heat kind of fluctuates wildly and you get inconsistent shots. How did you solve this when you were making the Espresso Series 1 with your new boosted boiler?
Yeah, so I was lucky enough to, Jake and team really gave me the ability to like, Nick, just blank piece of paper. What would you do? And, being driven by this 3-second heat up time thing, I basically said, all right, well, if I use just like a thermocoil or a thermal block, that's not going to work. Thermocoil with a thermal block with a heated group head, still not going to work. I need something to act as a capacitor, basically, because, when you're in the United States on 120 volts, you really only have a certain amount of power that comes out of the wall. And you're going to just be dumping cold water on the puck if you pre-infuse at like, anything over 3, 4, 5 milliliters per second. So I know I'm getting a little bit nerdy here, but I know the audience is,
please nerd out.
Might be following along with me here. So I was like, I had this wacky idea. I was like, if I hook a low thermal mass heater in series with a mini boiler, in series with a heated group head, I could basically manipulate all 3 different temperatures to have incredible thermal stability at the puck. So the mini boiler is just big enough to act as like a capacitor until the low thermal mass heater catches up in terms of target temperature. And by the time you hit the group head, it stabilizes everything. And so we're within a degree pretty much every single time as you're pulling shot after shot after shot. But your system doesn't take 20, 30, 40 minutes to heat up. It only takes the amount of heat up time necessary to bring the brass core block and the group head to temperature and bring the mini boiler to temperature, which is about 90 seconds. And so like for me, doing those calculations and seeing that, wait a minute, the physics is telling me we might actually be onto something here. And then building that prototype, like honestly, my mind was pretty blown. I was like pretty shocked that no one else had really done this before. So I felt pretty good.
Well, this is where, for me, I feel like a big problem with home espresso machines is at the start, people just looked at commercial machines and tried to smush it into a home machine and be like, we'll get boilers in there, we'll do it. And then they bought in the thermo blocks and that kind of heating element, but it's not really consistent. It feels like this is one of the first times I'm seeing someone look at the home espresso machine as a new thing and go, how can I solve this problem to get consistent heating? Now, I'm a bit of an idiot. Can I just try to describe it to you the way that I saw it and you tell me if it's right? Because maybe the layman's out there listening might be like, okay, I get it. So is it almost like the first point of the water entering, is that like a thermoblock kind of thing? So
yes, it's like a thermal block. So yeah, we use something called a low thermal mass heater, so we can change temperature more rapidly than a thermal block.
Right. So the water enters that, it basically heats it up, and that means that you don't have cold water going into the boiler. It's already entering hot. So that means you're cutting down on the heat up time. So it's going into the boiler, then it goes up into the group head, but then you have another heating element that can get it and regulate it to the right temperature so that you're getting consistency there. Is that how it kind of works?
Exactly. You're exactly right.
So cool.
And commercial machines historically have relied on kind of almost like a blunt force application of heat and mass, right? Is that have a big boiler, lots of water heated up so that like little bits of water taken out for espresso doesn't alter the general temperature too much, and massive blocks of metal that can just heat up and have this kind of radiating stability essentially, right? So it sounds like this is a big shift to be a little bit more elegant.
It's just a different approach. It's like sledgehammer versus like X-Acto knife.
But I have a quick question so a common thing that we see with home espresso machines is the idea of switching from extraction to steaming. There are some machines that'll have two heating elements, so you can do both at the same time. Sometimes that drives cost up. But generally when it has a single heating element, once you finish extracting your espresso, you have to switch to the steam one. Then it takes 30 seconds, 1 minute, whatever it takes to get the temperature up to be hot enough for steam. And there's this whole lag and, workflow. We know coffee people love workflow, so that hurts. Yours is still working off one, even though there's three parts, it's essentially one heating system. How does it then transition? You can't steam and extract at the same time on your machine, but you can extract and then instantaneously go to steaming. How does that work? How do you get that steam temperature instantaneously?
So part of it is based on our solenoid array and how we actually design the water pass of the system. So I'm pretty proud of the way that we design our solenoid array. But the other part is the way that we're using this low thermal mass heater. So like I'm a massive fan of these heaters. They can get to steam in about 3 to 5 seconds. And what we can do is we can automatically put water to the drip tray at any time. So any water that's left in the heater before it turns to steam, we could put to the drip tray and then switch over. So like you press that steam button as soon as you're done pulling a shot, and within 3 seconds, you have really hot, dry steam coming out of that steam wand.
So cool. Does that lead to any issues with the amount of water in the drip tray?
No, so not really. So we actually try to be really conscious about water conservation. So like the amount that comes out is between 4 and 6 milliliters, which is like what the actual heater can hold. And when I think about water conservation, I just want to go back really quickly to like the systems that heat up in 3 seconds. If you read the fine print, it'll say heats up in 3 seconds, but we really recommend purging 2 or 3 shots through the group head to heat it up, right? And so I thought, and we thought as a company, well, if we can actually avoid these pre-purging shots and we can get thermal stability really, really good on the first shot, we're actually saving, 60, 120, 180 milliliters of water. We actually might be doing a little bit of good there. So I know that's like a really small thing, but it is something I wanted to mention because we did really think about it.
No, all of those things completely add up, and it's nice that you're thinking about that. And it's not just the end goal of we can say 3 seconds heat up on the box. It's like we'll get it as quick as we can. But to your point, if you're saying that with the Espresso Series 1, the first shot that I pull is going to be at the exact temperature, then, that's something we're not seeing across other machines. Talking about going to the steam one, so beyond just having that instantaneous kind of bang, the steam wand is on, it's also smart. It also, does it have a temperature probe inside it? Is that how it works?
Yes, it has a temperature probe at the tip, and we designed, the geometry of the bottom of the steam wand tip really, really intentionally so that as you're blowing out steam, the thermal sensor is in a certain position, so it's always buried within the vortex. As you're steaming, you can set this machine to stop at whatever temperature you want. So say you are doing flat white and you want it to stop at, 60 degrees Celsius, it'll stop exactly at 60 degrees Celsius. If you have like an alternative milk and you want it to be a little cooler, totally, it'll do whatever you tell it to do, right? It leads into this like little added touch of like, I'm a purist. Like for instance, like when I first started designing this machine, I didn't have any of that in there. I just had like a slim wand and I thought it was going to be for the purists. And everyone was like, but what can we do to help the novice? What can we do to help someone who doesn't know when to stop steaming? What can we do to help the person that, you walk into the cafe and you hear that squeal of milk and, you hear that squeal of doom. It's like, we want people to be able to make better coffee at home. So, having this automatically turn off for you, hands-free, once you hit that certain temperature is just a really nice added touch to, number one, it helps pros. They don't have to hit another button because I know like I can be pretty lazy sometimes when I make coffee. And for the novices, it really helps them learn like, what does 60C feel like on that milk jug?
Yeah, that's really cool thinking about like what it feels like. Sorry, go ahead, Ben.
No, it's just taking me back to, turning out hundreds of cups in the cafe and you're just like holding the jug going like, okay, ow, okay, that's a good temperature. It's like, oh yeah, we're really great thermometers on the bottom of our hand.
I've talked about this before where I'm like, another problem from going from commercial to home is you get the information from commercial where people say stuff like, once it's too hot to touch, that's the right temperature. Everyone has different hands and different heat tolerances. Like that is not an accurate way of measuring stuff. B, if I walked around and put a thermometer in your milk every single time at a cafe, I'm sure it would vary in multitudes of up to 5 degrees either way as we do it. And C, is that what we're up to? C, third point. I probably said 1B and like listed off different things. At home, the temperature rises at a different rate from commercial. So that same application doesn't work of saying once it's too hot to touch, it's ready. When I'm using like a little Breville machine or something, it's a 6-second count after it's too hot to touch for it to be at the right temperature. So I always think for consistency in that, a little bit of guidance and teaching is always going to be a beneficial thing.
No, that's awesome. And the other thing that we put in that's like kind of nice is, after you steam, you wipe the wand down, you put it back in the home position, that'll automatically clear the excess milk from the inside. So like really trying to make it easy for people to get the results that they want.
But also increase the longevity of your machine. Purging the wand. If people forget, have dirty steam wands, it just makes it better.
I've been to a few cafes and I look at the steam wand and you see the crud and you're like, oh, I don't know if the coffee is going to be fantastic.
Just cheese, extra cheese.
No, and everyone blames the machine, right? They kind of all come back, especially with the domestic equipment. I'm sure the customer support team are like, thank you for putting that in. We're not going to be getting the calls of why is my steam pressure like really low? Why am I not getting anything? Oh, it's because it's like full of caked up milk inside the steam wand.
Yuck.
Yeah, that's not good. Well, so we've talked about like tackling the problems there of temperature consistency and stability there. Obviously about switching that into a steaming mode, getting like really good milk texture. But you've also included pressure profiling into the Espresso Series 1. This is the kind of technology that you would normally see on like a $20,000 commercial machine, right? So how did you go about integrating this technology into a home machine?
So I think I started with the fundamental building blocks of the things that I saw in the current landscape of home machines. And the thing that I found, quite honestly, is like when I bought my first espresso machine 11 years ago, I had to adjust the overpressure valve because my pressure of the group head wasn't 9 bar. It wasn't what I wanted. And I'm like, oh, these people are out here. I need to adjust the OPV, or, say you have a lever machine and the spring is, not the spring you want. I need to go get a different spring. And I was like, well, what are some potential ways that we could eliminate that? And I was like, well, we can actually monitor pressure real time at the group head. Wait, if we do that, I think we can change that on the fly. Like we kind of get that as a free thing, right? So, when I was a baby barista many years ago, I've worked in cafes with La Marzocco machines, but I also worked in a cafe with a Slayer Espresso V1. And I think at that time, I know why you're saying oof. Massive respect. I've changed the seals in the group head many, many times. We had serial number 41. Oh, but I fell in love with the profiling ability of that Slayer. We were pulling 45 to 50-second shots, and I was just loving the coffee that came off of that thing. And so, for me personally, I was like, this can give us the opportunity to, give that level of control to a home user at this price. So kind of snuck it in. That wasn't really in like the overall thing, but I was like, hey, I think we can solve these problems of like pressure being off of the group head by doing this. This also means that we can give the customer, a huge unlock to make the coffee however they want.
I think, it's pretty cool because, pressure profiling historically has been this really intimidating kind of a very niche thing. Like not even all commercial machines have got the capability to it. But you guys have made it almost like playful in diving in and being able to unpack it. Or as you said, how many layers of the onion do you want to peel back? You've kind of made that accessible to people.
Yeah. So I think from my perspective, like I know there's, pressure profiling has been a hot topic in specialty for a really long time. And some people say it's nonsense and some people say that they love it. I don't want to tell someone how to make an espresso. I don't want to tell a roaster how to roast their coffee. I want people to be able to have the option, right? So, but what I have found empirically is that pre-infusion and your puck prep and how good your puck prep is can have a massive and drastic impact on cup quality, right? So like my pitch to the team is actually like, hey, if we have users who are novices and they don't have great puck prep, we can allow them this pre-infusion at different pre-infusion fill rates to help them make better coffee. Like this technology is actually going to produce like a real difference in the cup. And so for that reason, it's like we push forward with it.
Now, can you give me a quick just background on, so you've got flow and pressure. Can you talk about how the difference of those and how it applies?
Sure. So like, I'll be very transparent. Like the machine can do flow profiling and pressure profiling. However, in the UI UX right now, we only let the user choose the flow fill rate for the initial fill. After that, we switch over to pressure. And I'll explain why we did this. Number one, I think it's pretty hard to explain pressure profiling to like a novice user. Even some like people who work in coffee as a barista, they can't really fully comprehend it. And so for me to go and explain pressure profiling or try to educate like the broader market about pressure profiling, then change it up to flow is really, really challenging. And I think everyone knows like as your pressure goes up, your flow goes down. As your flow goes up, your pressure goes down. You can't control both. You can only control one. So I don't know how deep in the weeds we want to get into, that sort of metric, but that's the reason why we kind of did what we did.
Well, let's unpack it just a little bit more. Can you describe for us if someone said, what really is this difference between flow and pressure? How would you unpack that?
Sure. So I think like controlling the flow is controlling the rate of water through the flow meter or through a tube, regardless of what the pressure is. So like if you want to maintain a constant flow rate and you have like a really tightly packed espresso puck, your pressure is going to go through the roof, right? You might not be able to even hit the pressure that you need to maintain that flow rate. But on the flip side, if you're controlling things through pressure, you're dynamically adjusting your flow rate to basically hit that target pressure at the group. A really good example of this is like, say you pull a shot and it goes way too fast, right? You have a home machine that has a little pressure gauge and you're like, oh my goodness, I never hit 9 bar. I only hit 6 bar. My flow is way too fast. Well, the faster your flow, the lower your pressure. Whereas if you have like a totally blocked puck, you choke your machine, you hit your 9 bar, 10 bar, 11 bar, whatever your machine goes up to, but you have almost no flow coming out of the group head. So that's the way that I like to think about pressure versus flow rate.
That's great. That really helped unpack it. And do you think that that's basket was that you have kind of a standardized restriction to the flow through the basket, no matter what pre-ground supermarket coffee you're putting in the basket, it's going to create pressure just because it's restricting that flow at that point.
That's completely right. And so, I remember hearkening back to my days as a baby home barista, 11, 12 years ago when I had my first machine and my first grinder. It's like, oh, this setting is too fast and I can't build pressure. This setting, I choke the machine. It's like, hey, if you have a grinder that can't grind fine enough or doesn't have the correct amount of steps, you can just use that in, the the pressurized portafilter and get a decent shot. And just to be transparent, we are including pressurized baskets with Espresso Series 1 because we want to appease the biggest market that we can, and we want to help like teach you and have you learn and grow with us. So no hate here for pressurized baskets. We want to meet people where they're at and, you know, help them along their journey.
So, you know, you've built in all of this capability with the Espresso Series 1, and there's all of this movement here, but you've actually also built in a lot of guidance and support, right, for people to help utilize all of these tools.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, outside of the milk steaming where like we're helping you pick the temperature and we're helping you stop the shot on time, we have basically a guided mode where we will give you after shot feedback. So we have, you know, algorithms that basically say, hey, based on your shot profile, like, so like, say I have like a long pre-infusion, you know, 45-second, you know, profile, we can calculate what the actual volumetric output should be in a certain amount of time. And if your shot runs too fast, we'll say, hey, your shot ran in this many seconds, try and grind, you know, a little bit finer. If your shot ran too slow, we can go ahead and say, hey, grind a little bit coarser. In addition to that, in terms of guidance, we're currently working on sort of an automatic mode where if your grind isn't perfect, the machine will automatically compensate and adjust. So like that's something that's currently deep in development, but the goal here is like, we're going to meet you where you're at. If you don't know how to pull espresso, we're going to try and help teach you. And if you're a professional, you can go as deep as you want.
Whoa, so your machine's going to automatically, is it adjusting the pressure to adjust then for the wrong grind size? Oh, yes. Damn. Yes. It's blowing us up here. That is amazing. That is so cool.
It's like intervention. It's like intervention mode. It's like, do not drink this, or quick, we got to fix this guy's terrible coffee.
Yeah. So the goal is like just to try and get you something drinkable, right? We want to try and hit a certain extraction yield. So if you grind too coarse, we're going to drastically drop that flow. If you grind too fine, we're going to basically try and pull a blooming espresso. So that's what we're working on right now. It's not finalized yet, but it's something that I'm like deeply involved in right now, and I want to help deliver for our customers.
But also coming to conservation, one of the biggest problems that people have is just wasting coffee when they're dialing in and going through half a bag before they actually get to anything drinkable. So getting people to a starting point that's drinkable earlier is amazing, both for the consumer, but also just wastage and that kind of thing. Man, that's awesome.
And that's one of the long-term goals of Fellow. Like we try and do it with Aiden. Like, hey, if you have an OGen 2, if you have an Opus and you get a drop, you know, we in the United States, we have Fellow drops where you're able to buy coffee directly through us. So we have like profiles and you're able to go to the machine. Hey, OGen 2 for a batch, you want to use this grind size, or single serve, you want to use this grind size, and the profile's there. We're going to continue to do that on Espresso Series 1 in the same way. So we really want to help try to minimize, you know, I had to throw away half a bag because of, you know, poor quality shots. Like, want you to not waste coffee and be able to help, you know, get you a good product right as soon as we can.
Are you talking beyond grind size there? Are you talking about actually all the other variables that are inside the machine as well for those coffee drops? So
absolutely.
Profiles,
so like
temperature.
100%. There'll be a different temperature. It'll be a different pressure profile. Be a different pre-infusion fill rate. And, you know, we're so excited because I think this is going to allow not just our customers, but also like roasters. You know, we have roasters right now that have Aidens who are developing profiles for their coffee. Like roasters are going to be able to do the same exact thing with Espresso Series 1.
Now, just jumping back to something you said just a little earlier about giving you feedback based on your shot, like if you had a longer pre-infusion or these sides of things. One thing that is crazy across the entire, you know, coffee landscape, you know, across baristas and everything is just these set in stone recipe things that you think applies across everything. Like everyone will be like, oh, a shot has to pull in 27 seconds. Like that's what it is. But once you start adding different pressure profiling, or once you add in longer pre-infusion, all those things impact it. So is the machine going to guide people on like, hey, look, if your pre-infusion is going to be this long, your shot actually might be a bit longer than what you'd expect. So will it kind of calculate all of those things?
Exactly. So the algorithm is based on the profile that you have set, right? So if you try and pull like a turbo shot that's 15 seconds and your shot pulls in you know, something longer than that, it'll be based on that. So like just because the shot pulled in 27 seconds, it's going to say, hey, your shot was actually a little long for the profile that you had. Same goes for like a super long lever style or long pre-infusion style shot. Like if your shot pulled in 27 seconds, it's going to say, hey, actually your shot probably should have been somewhere between 35 and 45 seconds. So we're not just dumping this like data on you that it comes out of nowhere. Like we're very intelligently trying to look at the profile and help you based on that profile so that you can learn like, oh, a turbo shot is this long and a lever shot is this long and a typical 9-bar shot is this long. So like really trying to help people make sense of what they're doing with the machine.
That's so cool because literally like the amount of times whenever you do a video about dialing in, it's like, do I start my timer when I press the button or when the pump engages or when I see the first drip? Or I know that I was told from Starbucks that I need to get it in 27 seconds. And even people just with dose being like 18 grams. 18 grams is the only dose that you should ever use when making espresso. Kind of seems to be like the general like consensus out there. Like I saw an interview at a coffee festival and every single person that was interviewed was like 18 grams is what you should use. There's nothing about what coffee you're using, what style. It's just 18 grams. Now, just comparing it to where we are in the market, the Breville Barista Express is the most popular espresso machine for home users in the world. What are 3 things about your new Espresso Series 1 that would set it apart from a machine like that?
So like outside of the integrated grinder, because I know the Breville Barista Express has an integrated grinder, right? So I think if I recall correctly, the first big thing is the ability to pre-infuse how you want, the ability to pressure profile how you want. It just unlocks just this world of different flavors and different extraction yields based on grind size that a user can explore, right? So that's probably the biggest one. Second one is thermal stability, to be honest with you. So if I recall, that machine has either a thermocoil, thermal block, or even if it has a low thermal mass heater, you'll never be able to pre-infuse at 8 milliliters a second. You'll never be able to pre-infuse at like a high flow rate. Otherwise, you'll dump cold water on the puck. Also, going back to flow and pressure, as your pressure changes, your flow changes, which means your rate of heating the water inside of that heater changes, which means your thermal stability can start swinging plus or minus 4 degrees or even beyond that, right? So we're going to have better thermal stability at the group head. And I think the third thing, if I recall correctly, I believe that machine is a 54 millimeter portafilter. Right. And so we have like a true 58 millimeter portafilter that comes in the box. It's bottomless, right, with a shot splitter attachment. So we're not going to make you go and buy another portafilter to upgrade. So like, in my opinion, like this is like as close to cafe, commercial style quality that you can get at a price point that people can afford. So I think those are probably the 3 biggest differences.
Incredible. And that kind of takes me into a deeper question here, especially with a machine like the new Espresso Series 1. Do you think people are making better coffee at home now than cafes are making?
So no disrespect to cafes at all, but I 100% agree with that. Like 100% agree with that. I think that there are such passionate home baristas out there that you can easily make better coffee at home when you're calm and not dealing with a 30-person line rush than, dealing with that sort of situation. So like, and I also see the explosion of, coffee grinders and home machines and home espresso over the past 10 years because of that. I mean, you have brands out there like Cafetech and Weber and, Zerno and, Mazer's making home machines. And, I just think like that segment of the market has really, really expanded. And, for me personally, like there are certain coffee shops that I go to that I love, but I really only go out for coffee like a handful of times a year because I know that the equipment that I have on my bench and the coffee that I can brew at my house can be exactly what I want, right? So like, I do think that there are many people at home making far better coffee than, coffee shops.
So with that in mind, with a stage where we're maybe making better coffee at home, what do you think the future of coffee looks like to you at home?
I think that it's going to get even easier to make higher quality coffee at home. And I think that's a real goal for Fellow. And that's one of my personal goals. It's like, I remember when the Ode came out, right? The first 64 millimeter flat burr grinder for filter coffee. And I think at the time it was like less than $300 US. And at the time, like nobody was doing that, right? You bring commercial aspects into your house for a price you can afford. And now you can you can compete with the cup of coffee that you get at your cafe. Like you don't necessarily have to go to your cafe and spend, $7 on a pour over if you can learn how to make it at home. So again, no disrespect to cafes, love cafe culture. But I do think that like that transition from the cafe to home is going to continue to expand over the coming years.
You heard it here first. He hates cafes. Live on the pod. He throw them down. Breaking news.
Awkward walks around San Francisco to your next cafe. There,
yeah, I'm going to get so much flack the next time I pop into Coffee Movement.
They'll be like, "Oh, why aren't you just making this at home?"
Yeah,
this might seem like we've kind of answered this question, but look, we've seen the Espresso Series 1 pop up all over the internet, right? Like people are talking about it, everywhere that I look. And after talking through all of the features, maybe it's kind of self-explanatory why, but what do you think like people were so hungry for that this has got them so ramped up and excited about?
I think for a long time, a coffee professional could not look someone in the face and be like, "Hey, beginner, you should spend $3,000 on this machine," because they might get into the hobby and not really like it, right? So they're like, "Oh, I understand probably don't have a lot of money." It's like, "Oh, only spend $500 or $600. And I think this machine fills the gap kind of as the middle ground of a machine that you can buy if you're a beginner or a pro. And if you're a beginner, you can grow with it. And if you're a pro, you can afford it. And so like, that's really my sort of hot take on Espresso Series 1. I think people are interested in it because for the price, it does things that have never been able to be done before, unless like you buy a machine and you hack it up and you modify it with, kits and stuff like that. And, the goal here was like, hey, you're going to be able to like go to a big box store and you're going to be able to walk into this big box store and there's going to be an espresso machine there that can literally do what the machine in your cafe can do. And, for me, like, that's just incredible. And it's just incredible to be a part of that like you can walk into a shop and just be like, hey, I want that espresso machine. And I'm going to be able to pull a lever shot at home, or I'm going to be able to pull a turbo shot at home. It's just like, that's just so wild to me.
Also, you can girl math
and obviously
it.
People are excited. Sorry, Ron.
I was just going to say you can girl math it. And I'm sure if you were to do like, if I bought 2 takeaway coffees every single day of the year and added that all up, it'll also just be cheaper to get this machine and make coffee at home as well. Like,
yeah, I mean, also like, there's also a sense of like, at least for me, when I was learning how to make espresso at home, like this sense of like joy and accomplishment of like, oh, I actually can learn how to like grind the right size and pull the right ratio and the coffee's tasting the way I want it to taste. And oh, I'm able to like texture milk the way that a cafe. And oh, but now I'm going to learn how to pour latte art, right? So it's like, for some people it's a hobby, and for some people they just want coffee to not get a headache in the morning, right? So like it really depends on what our customer wants. But we as fellow, like we want to please as many people as possible. And so we try to make things for like the novice all the way through the pro.
Nice. Now, it's time for a little segment on this show. And normally I do a whole bit here about how it's heating up and I pretend that it's too hot in the room. But I can't actually do that this morning because I've been literally trying to stop myself from shaking. It's so cold in here the whole time. But regardless of that, it's time for an extra hot take with 2 sugars. It's a hot take, 2 sugars. Now, I don't know if you have a hot take lined up ready to go for us, mate, but I also thought I could just throw you under the bus, as we like to do with our guests here on the show, and ask you a little question.
Sure.
What beliefs about espresso or espresso machines do you have that might go against the grain or get you in a bit of trouble?
I think I would be the type of person that argued that pressure profiling makes a massive difference. And I know like it's been a hot take for many, many years. And there's a camp that says like, no, it's nonsense. And there's a camp that says it does something. But just for me, grinding finer, slower pre-infusion, I don't know if it's the uneven extraction between the top and bottom of the puck. I can't tell you, but like it, to me, like you just get these syrupy, sweet, lingering shots, especially with lightly roasted coffee, that I haven't been able to do with a straight 9-bar machine. And so that's my hot take. Pressure profiling actually matters.
Absolutely. I mean, I would argue that I think anyone that's saying it doesn't is wrong. I think people just don't know how to use it. I would say that I'm also like someone who I sometimes get on the pressure profiling, and of course it makes a difference. I'll pull shots and I'm like, this coffee tastes completely different than when I made it, this other way. but I just don't know enough about the differences that I'm making as I do it. And I'll pull something that's incredible, but then I can't do it again, or, especially using like manual brewers or that kind of thing. So I think it makes a huge difference. I think a machine like yours that's going to give you a bit more guidance, I think that might be a nice kind of breaker for the audience that don't quite get it, and a machine that can kind of help get them to that point without having to do it manual could be super helpful. I'll jump in with my hot take here. Home coffee is the future of the coffee industry, and roasters better get on that before it's too late. Let me elaborate on what I mean there. People are now making coffee at home as good as their local cafe, and the cost of buying a great bag of coffee and brewing it at home is way cheaper than buying that $7, $8 coffee every time that you're out. Not only that, you've got pod drinkers who are upgrading to automated machines. You've got coffee nerds who are going, well, it's a bit more fun for me to go home and tinker and play with it myself and make my coffee than it is to go out and buy it. So I think roasters need to look at that market and be like, I need to be moving a big part of what I'm doing to that home retail market rather than just the cafe scene.
I like it. I think this is a warning and an opportunity for roasters, right? Is like, the warning here is, maybe not so much roasters, actually. I think this is maybe more towards the cafe industry, yeah? Is like, okay, the warning here is there is more and more capability outside of your cafe to get a great cup of coffee. The opportunity is, how do we make something super special and truly meaningful in that cafe experience? Because there's the hospitality element that is a completely different experience. It's something that you don't get at home and that we can build into that. So I think, we've got to be aware that competition is coming and it's not from the other cafe down the road, right? What do you think, Nick?
No, I completely agree. So it's just like there's a community aspect to the cafe, which I will always love. But in terms of like the exact product that I want to drink and how I like to drink it, and that's my home bar. I mean, I've told everyone here like what I have in my home bar. It's really tough to beat that.
Let's kind of zooming back out. We've talked about breaking down all of these complex problems, and we've talked about your mindset that you start with, Nick, of breaking down these big problems into smaller pieces. If you were to give some advice to the coffee industry or to people kind of working in coffee, are there any particular tools or mindsets or techniques that you think people could take to go and apply to their own problems or their own challenges that they're trying to address?
I think there's really two things. So the first is like, don't just accept everything for how it is. Thinking about like taking a commercial machine and just making it smaller for the home, right? And having people do that. Really don't be afraid to look at the problem from a completely new perspective. And after you do that, if you're really trying to solve that problem, break every single thing down to the fundamentals. Because if it doesn't break a law of physics, you can do it. It might take a lot of time and a lot of money, but you can do it. Don't just accept things for the way they are. Like, look at things in a new way, challenge things sometimes. And you might get feedback that it's like, hey, this is the way it is for a reason. But, if you're able to look at things in a new way, you can come up with really fresh perspectives. And that really means like new ways to solve these kind of wild problems.
Now,
I think that's great. I think that Nick has just inspired my hot take.
Oh, here we go.
Okay. I think that it's the recap hot take here.
And we're back.
Is that I think that the coffee industry sometimes accepts the status quo and the standard for too long, just because that's how it is, or that's how it was kind of has been for so long. And we don't kind of question why or could it be better enough. So I think some great points there from Nick about don't just accept the status quo. Let's pick that apart. Can things be improved?
And now jumping
don't be afraid to be wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. Be wrong. As you said, fail over and over and over again until you get something right. Now, jumping off my hot take of what we were doing and trying to be a bit more helpful. So the Espresso Series 1 has more capabilities than ever for the home user. What advice do you have for roasters to take advantage of this?
So I think, this is maybe potentially another hot take from me, right? But like, You have a lot of roasters out there that don't omni roast, like they don't have a single roast for filter and espresso. You have ones that do a filter roast and, an espresso roast. I would say like, don't be afraid to maybe think about roasting your coffee a little bit differently. Yeah, I'm not trying to say like you should change the way that you roast, but like, for a typical 9-bar only shot, you might have to develop your coffee a little more to get the flavor profile that you want. Whereas like if you do have a lever style shot or a long pre-infusion style shot, maybe you can roast a little bit lighter. Like maybe you don't have to go from doing filter roast and espresso roast. You can move toward an omni roast, and now you have more capability to like pull the flavors out of the coffee that you want. So don't be afraid to experiment. It kind of goes back to my thing of like, look at things from a new perspective. Don't be afraid to be wrong. Try things, and if you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't.
Going off that, quick question about culturally. From my time in America, what is the general roasting level? Because here in Australia at like specialty shops, I would find it's normally, and there might be some omni, but normally it's like, here's your espresso offering and here's your filter offering. And that's how it's kind of split up. And I know I went into Sight Glass when I was in San Francisco and I was like, oh, where are your filter coffees? Like which one are the filter? And he's like, what do you mean? And I was like, like I'm filter roast. I want a filter roast. He's like, what's a filter roast? It's just, this is the coffee. You can make espresso with it and you can make filter with it. Is that the general vibe? Is it more omni roast or does it get split and I just had a one-off experience?
I think in my experience, like at least when I started working in cafes about a decade ago, a lot of it started to go toward omni roast. At least like the level of specialty that I got involved with was like, hey, we don't roast for filter and espresso. We roast to this specific place where we think the coffee tastes the best, and we're going to be able to adapt it to espresso, right? So like, I do think there's been a really big like Nordic influence, and there are Nordic roasters who roast for filter and espresso. I don't mean that in a any type of way, but at least from my experience, I've kind of seen the shift toward one roast to rule them all. You know what I mean?
The Lord of the Rings reference. Perfect.
Yeah, you gotta go with it.
I got this beard, man. You gotta get
yeah. I need like a staff and like a hat or something.
The senior wizard of coffee.
Yeah.
Nice. VP of Wizard Coffee. Yeah. Like if we took this from back to the home user perspective, if you were giving people who were just starting on that home espresso journey some advice on what to think about, how to set things up, maybe not just with the Espresso Series 1, but just in general, what would be some top tips that you give people just starting on that journey?
This might sound, I don't want this to sound, the wrong way, but my advice would be don't get frustrated. Because I know for me personally, when I first started making espresso at home, 11-ish years ago, I got frustrated because I didn't understand why the shots that I was making didn't pull like my local cafe. And I would go back and forth down the street and be like, hey, I don't understand. Can you teach me about, particle distribution on grinders? And I was learning about all this fun stuff about why there were differences, right? So with Espresso Series 1, we're trying to put in that guidance so like you get less frustrated, right? It's like maybe your first shot didn't go the way you wanted to. We're going to tell you to try and adjust your grind in a certain way to give you the results that you want. So like I promise you that if you hang in there, you'll eventually get it. And when you do, it's going to be amazing. And you're going to be able to make incredible quality coffee at your house.
I can't bloody wait. Now, look, that probably brings us to the end here. I want to say a huge thank you for taking your time to answer all of our questions. I think what I really love is obviously the machine sounds incredible, but I love picking your brain and finding out about all the problem-solving techniques to get to this point and what really led to get to this point to help people brew better coffee at home. I think these types of machines are going to open the door to specialty coffee more and more, and the ways that you can experiment with your brewing and the way that you can enjoy your coffee. So I love what you and I love what the fellow team are doing there. Thank you for doing that. I think it betters the future of coffee for all of us involved. And the final question, the real big one is, and I'm going to add another question on top of it, is when will it be available in Australia? And can you send me one so I can play with it?
So global. So right now, in 2025, it's just direct to consumer only in the United States. Global launch is going to be early 2026. So I would expect to see these in Australia sometime in early 2026. Well, and in terms of getting you one, let me talk to the marketing team. I'll see what I could do.
Yep, they were talking about sending one, but just so they know, if it helps, we have a converter here. We have like the big power bank converter, so I can have a US model if that's what's wanting to be sent out. That'll work fine over here. We do have lots of followers in the US, so there's definitely benefits of doing it. Send me a machine, please. I'm trying to get him to confirm and say 100%.
He's really working it.
Yeah, I'm working at what I can do. Well, like I said, I'm excited about it. Normally, I'm just like, we don't need another coffee machine, but this is the one that I'm jacked up about. So you heard it here first, 100% guaranteed, sending me one out. Beautiful. Now, listeners of the pod, thank you for listening. If you're enjoying this pod, make sure to subscribe to it. We're getting more great guests just like Nick here today to come on. If you've got any questions, you can hit us at hello@itsjustcoffeepod.com. Follow us on all the socials for all the latest news. Nick, thank you so much for joining us. What a pleasure. I'm going to give you a round of applause on that one.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And then I forgot, Ben, what was the thing you were telling me before the pod that you wanted to say?
I only ever want to drink anaerobic coffees again. That's it. That's it from now on.
That's what he said. All right, what a way to end. We'll see you later. Bye. Woo.